violations that this would have fallen under, not just 2231. So this is something we're continuing to be mindful of.
Okay. Well, leaving aside, let's set aside the hypothetical of what might be a consequence for the current situation with these drones in Ukraine. What can you point to that the administration did with these same drones being used in these other places that both you and I have mentioned?
Well, in the case of the transfers to the Houthis, these transfers violated the targeted arms embargo under Resolution 2264. Also, over the past 12 months, the UN Security Council Sanctions Committee, under Resolution 2140, sanctioned 6 individuals for the violation of targeted arms embargo and other actions that threatened peace and stability in Yemen. And as I said, we're working closely with the UN Sanctions Committee on its panel of experts to facilitate their ongoing investigation of prior attacks in and from Yemen using these types of UAVs. As I said, we have a number of tools at our disposal as it relates to Iran's malign activities. In this case, as you asked on Monday, we are clear that we view this, along with our British and French allies, as a violation of 2231. This would have been a violation of 2231 in the past as well, but that is not the only tool at our disposal.
Right, but you didn't call it a violation of 2231 in the past, right?
Well, did you ask? Well, we're talking about this, Matt, because you raised this on Monday.
It's up to me or someone else to ask if you.
I don't have any specific, anything to offer as it relates to this reasoning.
But there's been no, but as it relates to Ethiopia, which you talked about yesterday, there hasn't been anything done, correct?
We raised this.
Well, raising it is one thing, but I mean, actually doing something about it.
We have raised this. We raised the transfer of these types of UAVs in the case of Ethiopia as well. I don't have any actions to preview. We don't have.
No, preview. I'm not looking into the future. I want to go to the past because it's just curious to a lot of people why this all of a sudden now is a big violation of 2231 when you didn't call it out as such before. And I mean, you just said that you didn't. You just said there was a violation of a different resolution. But
it would have been a violation of 2231 then too.
But you never called it that. But anyway, so there was nothing done in terms of action on the drones being used in Ethiopia, and nothing in Syria and in Yemen. The response was sanctions on 6 entities.
6 individuals. Yeah.
So I'm correct in
that. Look, Matt, I think that this is
correct. 6 in terms of Yemen, sanctions on 6 individuals. Nothing on no action on Ethiopia. No action in Syria. Is that?
I don't have a specific line item of actions to read out for you, Matt, but what I would reiterate, as I have reiterated over the course of this week, that as it relates to Iran's malign and destabilizing actions in the region, we have a number of tools at our disposal to continue to hold them accountable. Some of them are UN Security Council resolutions, some of them are sanctions, some of them are other actions, and at every turn we have not hesitated to use these actions. On the specifics of the UAVs, as I said yesterday, it would have been a violation back then. It is now in all of these cases, whether they are being transferred to the Houthis or the Russians. It would be a violation regardless.
Continuing this, looking as well on the president with this. There's a Security Council meeting today. Can you explain what the United States is looking for with this? What would be the consequences for, as you say, violations of Resolution 2231?
Thanks, Sean. So I don't want to get ahead of any potential actions or things that could come from a Security Council meeting. But to your question, yes, the U.S. will join the British and French in raising this issue at a closed meeting where the Security Council will hear from an expert briefer on the transfer of UAVs from Iran to Russia. As we've seen over the course of the past months, there has ample evidence that Russia is using UAVs from Iran in cruel and deliberate attacks against the people of Ukraine, including against civilians and critical civilian infrastructure. We will convey these grave concerns about Russia's acquisition of these UAVs from Iran in clear violation of UN Security Council 2231. But I don't have any specific actions to preview just yet.
Could you say whether the so-called snapback of sanctions is something that you would support, a return of or some further UN sanctions in response to this?
Again, I don't want to get ahead of this process and get ahead of our meetings and engagements with our partners in New York.
Just one more thing on that: the European Union is writing some sanctions on regarding the drone transfer. Do you have any comment on that? Is that something that's been coordinated with the U.S.? How do you are you hopeful for other countries also?
So we have been coordinating closely with the EU, but I'm not going to get into the details of those diplomatic discussions. But we have been warning about these transfers since July, and we would welcome the EU sanctioning Iran for supplying weapons to Russia, and we are aware of reports that the EU is considering these actions. And also I would again note and reiterate that the United States itself continues to have tools at its disposal that are practical, that are aggressive, that are useful in holding Iran accountable, and you have seen us take those actions as it relates to Iranian malign activity. Simon?
Taiwan.
Can I, since it'll be on the same topic, then I'd come back to you, Simon, I promise.
Thank you so much. I also
Alex.
have a couple of other questions.
Well,
First,
let's try to
on this topic.
work the room a little bit, Alex, today.
Thanks so much. If you can give us specifics about potential U.S. response, can you at least tell us if Iranian government is in violation of the U.S. sanctions against Russia? I know the administration updated its policy on Friday, of Act 1092, called Russia Harmful Foreign Activities Sanctions. Is Iran in violation of those sanctions? And what would you do if you, what's your next step if you...
Sorry, I didn't hear the middle. Which sanctions specifically are you saying they are?
It's called Russian Harmful Foreign Activities Sanctions. The Treasury updated last Friday.
I will let the Treasury Department speak to if these kinds of activities fall under a specific entity of their designation. I will let them speak to that. But I think the bigger picture here is that, as I've said consistently this week, Russia continuing to rely on countries like Iran for its unjust, its unlawful, and its barbaric invasion into Ukraine should be deeply troubling to the world, especially to those countries in the region. Iran has a very long track record of, as I've said, malign and destabilizing activities, not just in the region, but across the world. And so this is something we're going to continue to work closely with our allies and partners on, including at the UN, and we'll continue to use and have at our disposal a various set of tools. But I'll let Treasury speak to the specific sanctions. I'm going to go back to Simon, and then we'll work the room a little bit. Go ahead, Simon.
Sure, yeah, thank you. On this, so there's reporting that the US and Taiwan are discussing co-production of weapons, in order to speed up production of weapons to Taiwan. I guess given the broader situation with China, is that something that you can confirm is being discussed, and is this something that has been that you are sort of more seriously considering given recent events?
Thanks, Simon. I've seen those reports. I don't have anything specific to offer as it relates to them. But what I would say broadly is that the U.S. is looking at all options on the table to ensure that the rapid transfer of defense capabilities to Taiwan can take place as swiftly as possible. And consistent with the Taiwan Relations Act, as you know, we have made available various services and defense articles for Taiwan's security. And the swift provision of these technologies and these services, we believe, are essential to Taiwan's security. But I don't have anything specific to offer on that report.
Is there any way you can acknowledge or confirm that there's been an increase in, or a new round of discussions in that towards that aim?
Again, I don't have anything specific to offer. This is something that we've long said. It's something that we believe, again, is in the interest of Taiwan's security, and we're continuing to look at various options. Gita.
The Canadian Foreign Minister has invited her female counterparts from across the world to participate in a virtual meeting about women in Iran and the demonstrations going on that's about them. Since Secretary Blinken doesn't check one of those boxes, is the U.S. going to be represented at another level in that meeting?
Thanks, Gita. So first and foremost, we as an entire government are continuing to pay close attention to Iran's state-sponsored violence against women that we're seeing all over their country. These protests are now entering their second month. I believe we're approaching almost 40 days since the death of Mahsa Amini. And so what we have seen is we have seen Iran more violently and more aggressively crack down on these protests. We're seeing the reports of hundreds killed, potential children being impacted, children being killed. So this is something that the entirety of this administration is paying attention to and focusing on. As it relates to the Canadians, Secretary Blinken had the opportunity to discuss Iran and the protests with Foreign Minister Jolie during their bilateral engagement about a week and a half ago. They spoke to this in their press conference. So I don't have a specific U.S. representative to any potential meeting to share. If and when that happens, we'll be sure to make sure that this group is aware. But rest assured, this is something we're going to stay lashed up with our Canadian allies on, and we'll remain in close touch with them. Chani?
Thank you. On North Korea, I have two questions on Korea. As you know, that North Korea fired 900 artillery rounds over 4 days. And also North Koreans military commanders still blame the United States and South Korea for their provocations. Do you think North Korea's provocations is simply a signal to attract attention for dialogue or action for aggression?
Well, Jenny, again, I'm not going to try and speculate or get into the minds of those in Pyongyang, but we have been consistent over the entirety of this administration that we believe dialogue without preconditions with the DPRK is a key facet of our ultimate goal here, which is the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. The shelling that we've seen over the course of this week is of serious concern. It is further destabilizing towards the region and has the potential for adverse impacts on our allies and partners, especially Japan and the Republic of Korea, with whom we continue to remain closely engaged on this. But I don't want to get in the minds of those in Pyongyang.
Unlikely in the past, Kim Jong-un said that he would not engage in dialogue to give up their nuclear weapons. On that, what does the United States about sharing tactical nuclear weapons with South Korea for help maintain the nuclear balance between the two Koreas?
I will let my colleagues at the Pentagon speak to specific systems and their use and deployment, but I think you saw President Biden over the course of this administration affirm U.S. extended deterrence and the commitment to the ROK using the full range of U.S. defense capabilities, including nuclear, conventional, and missile defense capabilities. But
so
again,
are you still pushing dialogue to North Korea?
As I just said in the first part of your question, we continue to believe that dialogue without preconditions with the DPRK is an important aspect of our ultimate end goal here, which is the complete denuclearization of the peninsula. I'll come back to you, Alex. Go ahead.
Thanks so much, Vedant. May I get your reaction to Turkish-Russian agreement to form a natural gas hub in Turkey?
So, first and foremost, I want to say that Turkey is a long-standing and valued NATO ally that has, over the course of the conflict since February, expressed strong support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of Russia's aggression. We have worked closely with our allies and partners to impose severe and unprecedented costs on Russia, including through sanctions, export controls, visa restrictions. We have urged Turkey and all of our allies and partners that no one should become a safe haven for illicit Russian assets or transactions, and we will continue to make that case. And as it relates to the energy conversation, we have continued to urge our allies to take steps to diversify their energy sources, to reduce energy reliance on Russia. And in the case of Turkey, we are working with them closely to assist in their own efforts to enhance energy security in the long term.
Are there any talks going on right now that we may not have heard about?
I don't have any specific engagements to read out.
Two more questions on Ukraine.
Sure.
What do you make up of Putin's announcing martial law in 4 annexed regions?
So, it should be no surprise to anybody that Russia is resorting to desperate tactics to try and enforce control in these areas. The truth is that Russia is not wanted in these regions, and the people of Ukraine are rejecting Russia's illegal invasion and seizure by force of what is Ukrainian territory. No matter what the Kremlin says or does, no matter what they try to enact via decree, via paper, or otherwise, Crimea, Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia are Ukrainian sovereign territory. And any claim that Russia makes over these territories is illegitimate. They have no legal claim whatsoever. There is no jurisdiction that they have over those territories. This is Ukraine's land, and Russia has blatantly violated Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as violating the UN Charter with their illegal acts.
And also on this one, the EU chief made a statement about Russia targeting energy infrastructure in Ukraine. And she called it, quote-unquote, act of pure terror that amount to war crimes. I know you guys are refraining from using the T word, but the Defense Department already used it. Yesterday, the Pentagon said that Russia is trying to terrorize Ukraine. Do you agree with that?
So I've not seen those specific comments, Alex, but what I would say is that over the course of this conflict, we have seen very clearly members of Russian military and Russian forces partake in and conduct atrocities, and those are very serious. And again, another example of their barbaric and illegal and unjust action that they're taking in Ukraine. But I haven't seen those specific comments, so don't have anything to offer there. Kylie's had her hand up for a while. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So there is some increasing concern about Congress's continued commitment to supporting more and more assistance for Ukraine in terms of security assistance and budgetary support and the like. So I'm just wondering what, if anything, the State Department is doing to prepare to engage with Congress next year in a different way on this. If there are more Republicans who are concerned about this, are you guys already, having meetings with existing supporters of Ukraine support on the Hill? Can you just, describe to us what efforts are underway?
Sure. So, Kylie, I think first, this is a little bit of a hypothetical. Certainly don't want to get ahead of the process here, but we talked to Congress on a number of issues, including, some of the many pressing foreign policy and national security topics in front of us, and we engage regularly with majority staff, minority staff, but I don't have any sort of specific engagements to read out. I think what I would use this opportunity to reiterate, though, is that President Biden and Secretary Blinken have been very clear that our commitment to our Ukrainian partners is not just unwavering, but it is ironclad, and we're going to continue to take steps and do what we can to ensure that Ukraine has everything that it needs to defend itself, to defend its territorial integrity, and put it in the best position possible at a potential negotiating table whenever that may be.
And just one quick follow-up on
Sure.
that. One of the things that's been discussed is the need for, or the potential need for additional oversight of some of the support that's going to Ukraine, particularly, the budgetary support. Can you just, is the State Department, do you guys do a review of all of that assistance that goes out of the door from state and USAID to make sure that it ends up in the exact place where it was intended to end up without any corruption along the way?
There are, of course, my understanding, there are parameters in place for how this aid is deployed and its use. I don't have any specifics at my fingertips, but I can check with the team if they can get you some a more specific or technical breakdown of how the process works. Michelle?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One on Sudan. Reports say that Sudan's military and a group of political opponents are close to a deal to resolve the crisis there. The United States is working in the mediation. Do you have anything to say about this?
Sure, Michelle. So the U.S. is not mediating in any of the current initiatives, as these are Sudanese-led processes. The U.S. is working to encourage and support the Sudanese-led inclusive dialogue that ultimately seeks to produce an agreement to form a civilian-led transitional government and guide Sudan towards free and fair elections, all in line with the Sudanese people's aspirations for freedom, democracy, peace, and justice, and prosperity.
That means there is no U.S. role in this mediation?
Again, we are not involved directly. It is not. We are not mediating any of the current initiatives because they are Sudanese-led processes.
Another one on Saudi Arabia and Yemen. To what extent the differences between the U.S. and Saudi will affect the renewing truce in Yemen?
So I can speak to the United States perspective, which is that we are deeply concerned that the UN-mediated truce in Yemen expired in early October without the parties reaching an agreement on an extension. We're glad that key elements of the truce have continued. They have offered serious tactical, tangential benefits to the people of Yemen. Special Envoy Lender King was in the region last week to support these discussions and to ensure that they're ongoing. And we, of course, welcome the Republic of Yemen government support for the UN truce proposal, as well as the efforts from our Saudi partners, from Oman, and from other regional countries to support the truce extension. And we, frankly, encourage and urge the Houthis to engage in negotiations in good faith and to work with the UN to come to an agreement on the extended truce.
And are you in contacts with the Houthis to release the Yemeni employees who are in prison?
As you saw, the Secretary put out a statement on this morning. We 1 year ago, as you know, Houthi forces breached the compound by the U.S. Embassy prior to its suspension of operations in 2015 and began detaining, without justification, Yemeni locally employed staff. We call on the Houthis to release these Yemeni citizens and return them to their families as a demonstration of their commitment to peace for the people of Yemen and willingness to participate in a future government that respects the rule of law. The ongoing detention of these employees shows a gross disregard for diplomatic norms and constitutes an affront to the entire international community.
And my final question. News reports say that Special Envoy Hochstein is going to Israel and Lebanon next week to sign the agreement between the two countries. Can you confirm that?
So I don't have any specific travel to announce, but what I would say is that Presidential Coordinator Hochstein continues his robust engagement to bring this agreement across the finish line, and we are, in fact, finalizing logistics with the parties to confirm a final meeting in Nakora, Lebanon, but I don't have a timeline to offer or any other details on potential travel. I'll come back to you, Sean.
Sure. Can I ask you about the Kashmiri photojournalist, Sana Ashon-Maktub? She won the Pulitzer Prize and, according to her own account, was refused to was not allowed to leave the New Delhi airport and issued a valid U.S. visa. Is the United States aware of this? Does the United States have anything to say? Do you believe she had a valid visa?
Yeah, we are aware of the reports of Ms. Matu being prevented from traveling to the U.S. and are tracking these developments closely. We are committed to supporting press freedom, and as the Secretary has noted, a shared commitment to democratic values, including the respect for the independence of press, is a bedrock of the U.S.-India relationship. But I don't have any other specifics to offer, but we are tracking this closely.
Can you say if the U.S. has raised the case with the Indian authorities?
I'm not aware of and can't speak to any diplomatic engagements on this, but when we have anything to update, certainly we'll share with this group.
Okay, so one more individual.
Sure.
A different case of involving travel. An Iranian, Al-Nasr Kalbi, the climber who was quite successful in South Korea, reportedly was flown back from South Korea to Iran. There are pictures of her today wearing a hoodie. She, of course, had appeared without a headscarf in an Instagram post. Is this something you want to weigh in on about her treatment?
So the Iranian regime and its leaders have a long history of abusing the rights of women and violating their freedom of expression, including through threats, through intimidation, through violence. Reports of intimidations and threats to El-Nasr Kabi appear to be the latest inexcusable example of such tactics. The world and the Iranian people will be watching how she's treated. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, Iranian state media is saying 14 foreigners have been arrested during protests, or they call riots. That includes citizens from the US, as well as UK, Austria, France, Russia, Afghanistan. I wonder, are you able to confirm whether you know of any Americans arrested during the protests?
Simon, I'm not able to speak to any specific American citizen equities as it relates to the protests. I'm happy to check to see if we have anything specific and can get back to you. But this is another example of the cruel and violent suppression of peaceful protest, and it shows that the Iranian government clearly fears its own people. We continue to coordinate with a wide range of international partners to respond to Iran's state-sponsored violence against women and the government's ongoing violent crackdown on peaceful protesters.
Can I just ask you for a clarification
Sure.
on that? Because it sounded as though your initial response, you don't know about this. I mean, to be fair to you, this was literally reported within the last 10, 15 minutes. So, are you saying that you are aware?
No, I'm saying that
there are these 14 foreigners, including U.S., Australian, British citizens, that you know that, or are you even aware of the report from the Iranian news agency?
I am not aware of the report, and I'm happy to. What I said is happy to check with the team if there are any specific American citizen equities, but was speaking to the crackdown on protests broadly.
I just want to make sure that you're not.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding the prospect of use of nuclear tactical weapons by Putin in the Black Sea, UK Defense Secretary was yesterday having a meeting with Jake Sullivan over shared security concerns. My question, has Secretary Blinken been briefed about the meeting, and is he planning to talk to Secretary Cleverly, or did he talk already? So if you can just tell us something about that, if you have any.
Sure. So I don't have any specific bilateral or diplomatic engagements for the Secretary to read out. He's obviously is paying attention to the issues surrounding the conflict in Ukraine quite closely and receives regular updates. I don't have a specific to offer in this scenario, but what I would say again is that we have not seen any reason to adjust our own nuclear posture, nor do we have any indications that Russia is preparing to use nuclear weapons. We're going to continue to monitor this very carefully. Of course, these threats, we take them quite seriously. The use of this kind of rhetoric is irresponsible, as we've said throughout the course of this conflict. But we're not going to be intimidated by this rhetoric, and we're going to continue to pay close attention on this.
Can I just also ask about the Western Balkans, because today Gabriel Escobar is in Pristina, and he's going tomorrow to Belgrade. I don't know if you're aware of that, but if you are, can you tell us a little bit about the meetings that took place today in Pristina and the expectations for the meeting with the Serbian president tomorrow in Belgrade?
Sure. Let me see if I have.
Kosovo conversation.
So, to take a step back, the U.S. fully supports this EU-facilitated dialogue, and as you noted, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State within our EUR Bureau, Escobar, is traveling to Pristina and Belgrade to support this process. As you all know, also, the Secretary had a chance to speak with both the Serbian President and the Kosovoan Prime Minister early last week, and the Secretary underscored the United States' support for the EU-facilitated dialogue and urged constructive engagement to secure peace and stability across the region.
But nothing about the meetings that took place today.
I don't have anything offer immediately, but we'll see if there's a more specific readout coming in the back.
Yeah, to follow up on the earlier question about dealing with a new Congress and aid to Ukraine, one criticism some Republicans have had is that the U.S. has depleted some of its stockpile of certain weapons, javelins, stingers, things like that. Just yesterday, a Republican congressman gave a speech at a conservative think tank saying that we need to stop aiding Ukraine because, or say we need to be concerned about aiding Ukraine because we're giving up too much of our own stockpile and not replenishing it fast enough. When you do it, if you do have to deal with a new Congress, or just in general, when you hear these criticisms, how do you respond to that particular criticism that we're depleting too much of the U.S.'s own stockpile? And is there any line or any criteria by which you would determine that we are sending too much and depleting too much, or are we just going to continue going forward indefinitely with that?
Well, a couple of things. First and foremost, again, this is a little bit of a hypothetical, so I don't want to get ahead of that. Number two, as the Secretary and the President have been quite clear since February, our commitment to Ukraine is ironclad and unwavering, and we will continue to do everything in our power to ensure that they have what they need to protect their defense, for their self-defense, to protect their territorial integrity, to protect their sovereignty. I will let my Pentagon colleagues speak to specific assets within under the United States ownership, but I can guarantee you that we would not do anything to infringe on our own defenses and infringe on our own national security, even when robustly supporting another partner like Ukraine. Go ahead.
Do you have any comments on the state of peace talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan following the deployment of EU monitoring mission this week? I know in the past you did praise that step, but do you think it will help them to move the needle at this point to bring long-term peace to the region?
That is our hope, Alex, and that is something that the Secretary and Ambassador Rieker and others from in this building continue to push for as they discuss this issue. I don't want to get ahead of that process, but of course our ultimate goal here is a peaceful solution and resolution between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Go ahead, Sean.
Just to follow up on the statement yesterday on Cuba.
Yeah.
There was an announcement yesterday of $2 million in aid. Can you just say whether this is a one-off, whether there's any direct contact with Cuban authorities on this, whether you see this in any way leading to a broader process?
Sure. So this was a result of direct engagement with the Cuban government and, of course, other stakeholders as well. I don't want to get ahead of that process, but we stand with the Cuban people as they work through this and recover from this disaster, and we'll continue to monitor and assess humanitarian needs in coordination with our trusted partners in the international community, and we'll take additional steps if it deems necessary. But I don't want to get ahead of that process.
You stand with the Cuban people, but don't stand with the Cuban government. Is that correct,
Matt?
You stand with the Cuban people and trying to help them recover from the hurricane damage, right?
Of course.
You specifically don't stand with the Cuban government in trying to help it restore normality after all the damage that was caused.
Well,
is that a fair characterization?
Through this aid, we intend to work with trusted independent organizations operating in the country who have a long presence working in hurricane-affected areas, and we're currently reviewing applications from organizations such as the International Federation Red Cross and the IFRC to provide assistance as well.
But the point is that the Cuban government has asked for aid. You're not giving money, and this is a rather small amount of money, $2 million. It's not nothing, but it's a small amount of money, and it's going to the Red Cross, it's not going to the Cuban government. And I'm not suggesting that it should be going to the Cuban government, but I want to make sure that I understand that when you say that you stand with the Cuban people, you specifically mean that you're not going to stand with the Cuban government.
We have directed this aid through this mechanism because we believe it is the best vehicle for delivery and the best vehicle for having direct impact on helping the Cuban people rebuild from this disaster.
Okay, because you know that the Cubans, although they have thanked you for this small contribution, have also said, in preparation for their annual vote at the General Assembly on condemning the embargo, that they've lost $3.8 billion minimum, just and because of the embargo. And so, when you say that you're standing with the Cuban people to help them recover from the hurricane, I just want to make sure that the position of the U.S. government is still the same, that you're not standing with the Cuban government to help the Cuban.
That is correct. I'm not intending to change U.S. policy.
Can we stay in the Caribbean then for just 1 second?
Sure.
I just want to find out if there's any update that you have on Haiti.
Sure.
And,
sure, Matt. So I don't have a specific update for you, but to reiterate what we discussed a little bit yesterday, and I believe our ambassador up there, Linda Thomas Greenfield, spoke about this, that the U.S. and Mexico have worked closely on 2 new draft resolutions that we hope the Security Council will unanimously support. One, to impose financial sanctions, a travel ban, and a targeted arms embargo on criminal actors inflicting suffering on the Haitian people, and the other resolution authorizing a non-UN international security assistance mission to approve the security situation and enable the flow of humanitarian aid. But I don't have any specific updates to offer. Anything else? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks. Ready for the hot one?
Ready for the hot